welcome back to Make Japa Great Again. It's a phrase that I think of frequently because there are many things vying for our attention. Everyone who's an overachiever has multiple projects going on at the same time. And every institution, every person needs a base. A house has to have a strong foundation. Corporations start off with the reason that they exist, a mission, vision statement, and say this is why we're doing this. Otherwise, it becomes confusing and complicated. But when we have a clear idea why we're doing something, we have a foundation, then everything else can take its proper place when we have the foundation laid. So, Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu's proposition was very simple, and that's been passed down through our disciplic succession. And that is to make a mantra out of it. Your Bhajan is your base. Base your life and all the other things that you're doing in your life on your Bhajan. Make sure that you have that in place before you try to build other things on top of it. Otherwise, eventually they'll fall apart. As Shukadeva Goswami tells us in the Bhagavatam, Deha Patra Kalatradeshu Atmasainya Satsapi Tesham Pramotunidhanam Pasyanapina Pashyati. He basically says, all other things that you think could be your base, like your body, if it's very strong and stout, then that'll be my base. Or even the family structure, which is extremely important for us in many different ways, socially, psychologically, economically, and so forth. He said, ultimately, that base won't hold either, even though it's important. And then he moves on to various other aspects of our lives. They're important, but they're not the most important. So he said the most important aspect in your life is your personal connection with Krishna. And that's achieved, says Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu, especially by your chanting. So it leads us back to this idea that your bhajan is your base. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada essentialized everything by giving us 16 rounds and saying, that's the main thing. And if you make that your base, then all the other things will make sense and they can fall into place properly. So, my mantra for the day, your bhajan is your base. And so, just think about it a little bit while you're chanting, perhaps, or as you're leaning into your chanting, think about how important it is in your life. And think on the scale of 1 to 10, how important is it? How much is it your base, or how much is it an incidental activity that you're performing, and so forth, and see if you can identify it on a scale of 1 to 10, if that's not too technical. What do you think? What number are you? On a scale of 1 to 10, would you say? 11. Okay. That's going to be hard to follow. Thank you very much. Okay, well, let's go ahead and chant. Jai Śrī Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Premanande Haribol. If I may continue this thread about your bhajan is your base. In the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna goes to great length to describe various realms. In fact, he describes how the material world is has a shaky base. It's a being constantly created and recreated. And then you get more details in the Srimad Bhagavatam about even in the higher planetary systems, If you're not high enough, there's a partial devastation in the material world during which people have to flee their realm and move to a higher ground. Even on this earth, we see that Earth's always changing, sometimes more water than land, and so forth. And so how does one, and then he advocates, actually, for a higher realm. Parastasmatu bhavonyo vyakto vyaktat sanatana. It's not vyakto vyaktat. It's not manifest and unmanifest. In other words, it's a solid base. It's not shaky. So how does one do that? The Vedanta Sutra, last verse says, anavriti shabdat, which means by sound, you can readjust the base that you're in. The realm that you're in is defined by the sound vibration that pervades that realm. And sound is so powerful that anavriti shabdat means you can change your base by changing your sound vibration. And even as one's in the material world, this is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's contribution to practical theology, which is sonic in nature. And that is that even as you're in the shaky realm of the material world, everything moving, the mind moving, the earth moving, everything in our life morphing into something else, that's the nature of the world. That's why it's called bhava. It's always remanifesting itself into something else. That can be stabilized, and we can find solid ground in sound vibration. And therefore, Bhagavatam says, iti murtyabhidanena mantra murtim amurtikam. The easy process through which one can find this solid ground is through the mantra. And it continually reassures us that this is real. It's not something amorphous or just theoretical, but actually it's the foundation of everything. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, make this the basis of your practice, the chanting of the holy names, and that will connect you to the realm where you won't find your feet slipping or the ground disintegrating underneath your feet. And now there's a few thoughts or comments about any ways you've experienced the Maha Mantra being a foundational aspect of your life. The chanting of your rounds, how has it helped you to be more solidly situated in everything else that you do? Which is kind of the definition of a base.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna Maharaj. For me, the chanting of Maha Mantra is a base in two ways. One way I can think of it is that it's the first thing I do in the morning. It's what starts my day. It's like the foundation of my day. It sets the tone for my day, really. And another way you gotta look at it is that if I'm going through a struggle, if I'm kind of wavering off a certain path that I want to follow, chanting can be what brings me back to that path, back to the right direction I want to go in. If during the day I'm getting too distracted, not really focusing on something, then I can chant and then come back to kind of ground myself again, come back to like the center or like align myself again. Those are the two ways I see it.
Very nice. If all else fails, put your hand in your bead bag. Ramapriya, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Shankaranand Prabhu has want to share.
Shankaranand, Haribo.
Very well, Prabhu. Thank you very much for the wonderful thought that you shared, the shaky ground and solid ground. So that reminded me a few years ago when I was in Minneapolis. Minneapolis is a place of a lot of snow. So while driving, people generally use the studded tires. So the tires which have studs, even if the snow and very slippery, the temperature is sub-zeros, you have a solid ground. I mean, you have solid grip on the road. So people who use actually studded tires, they can actually go much faster on the road without much anxiety. Not that the accident don't take place, but people who have studded tires, they have much, much more solid grip on the road in spite of sub-zero temperatures. So I think this holy name is actually the studded tires which keeps us grounded in the shaky grounds of material existence and move forward towards the spiritual world.
We'll take it. It's a nice metaphor. In fact, there's a verse in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam that says that even if you run with eyes closed in bhakti, you won't slip and fall because it's such a solid path. And I love the Minnesota icy roads, solid tires. Hansapriya.
Hare Krishna. I was watching the picture of the Ian hurricane thing that has washed off everything in that coast where the heavy rain was. And what you mentioned was, the shaky ground. I was thinking what you need is a strong foundation. And I was thinking the strong foundation, how it comes to us is over the years, what has been there with us all the time, that you can depend, take a shelter, feel, grounded, the stronger foundation. And that has been with the holy name, because that Krishna has been there with us all the time. Even happiness or, sadness, anything, that we have something to hold on to it, and that is there is no other option than just dipping into the holy name, because there's no other foundation.
I like your point about over time when we get in the habit of taking shelter of Krishna, despite loss or gain, victory or defeat, and we see that he's always there, then we start to realize that that's our real foundation. We have Ashok Krishna Prabhu. Oh, okay.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Thank you.
For me personally, I think it's helped me with work. It's, I'm a person who's kind of like a sponge. I take a lot of stress. I absorb all the stress around me. And for me, chanting and faith in Krishna has kind of provided a stable ground that even if I walk into a stormy situation at work or at home or in my personal life, I feel like I'm taken care of, like I'm protected. So it kind of just makes me feel like I'm wearing a protective layer, yeah.
Nice. That's very relatable. So there's so much going on in our lives, as I said before, and if we have that constant where we know we can take shelter of the holy name, it's very important. Thank you very much. Ashok Krishna Prabhu.
I just wanted to follow up on this Mataji's comment as well with my work. Recently, there have been some new skills that I'm trying to learn. And of course, when you're learning something new, you're always getting stressed about, oh, I'm not getting this, or when would I get this, right? And that, and so just yesterday, there were things that were not coming to me, what I was trying to do, and I got really stressed about it. And at home when I came, and because of that mindset, it was even more challenging to do anything, right? Because you're anxious, so you can't even do what you know that you could do. So when I came home last evening and I just chanted for a bit, and it made me relaxed and calm. And then I picked up that thing again, and it worked. I was able to solve what I wanted to do. So it was like, oh, wow, this provided the solace and calmness to my mind, which was agitated throughout the time, and I could not even do anything with that. So I think I could relate to this, what you were telling about this, that the solid foundation, going back to it, helps us to become stronger, and day-to-day struggles we can manage with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashok Krishna Prabhu. One of the ways in which it's truly foundational is the realization that we really can't do anything without Krishna's help. Hrishikena Hrishikesha. He's the master of our senses, we're not. And what we can do is actually endeavor to engage our senses in his service. And if the senses aren't forthcoming, there's not much we can do. We can only depend on him. So remembering that as we're chanting, that Krishna, please let me engage my senses in your service. They're your senses, you're the master of them, and remembering also that we're helpless, that if the senses stop working, there's nothing we can really do about it. So if we have that very foundational feeling, which is that I'm dependent on Krishna, this is the very essence of the mood, Queen Kunti says, and others, of chanting Hare Krishna, is just feeling ourselves dependent on Krishna. Our bhajan is our base. Gaur Premanande Haribol. Hare Krishna. Last comment. I had a revelation about my dear friend and Godbrother Savas Prabhu, because many years ago, when I came to Los Angeles, Nirkul and I had pulled up there on Vaisesika, and I got out of the car, and Savas Prabhu was standing there, overseeing something, and we offered mutual obeisances, and then embraced, and I said, "How's it going?" And he said, "I'm hanging by a thread." And I thought about that for many years, just his immediate reaction, what that meant. And then I started realizing, because analyzing his life, how is it that he's hanging by a thread? He gets up every morning very early and finishes his rounds before Mangalartik. And I was thinking about what that thread is that he's hanging by, is his beads. That's a thread. And the idea of a thread is also, one might think, well, in the analogy hanging by a thread, it sounds like life is completely tenuous, and it is if the thread we're hanging on to is this idea that I'm my body and that I'm going to be here forever and I'll do the best I can. In fact, a thread is also a narrative. We talk about, are you following a certain thread? And the thread in the material world is just hang on as long as you can, and then whatever happens, happens. I mean, that's one thread that doesn't work out well. And in the Gita, Krishna says, Matak paratanam nanyat kinchirasti dhanajaya mai sarvamidam protam sutre manigana iva. He said, actually, the whole world's hanging by a thread. It's like pearls strung on a thread. And what is that thread? It's me. I'm holding it all together. All the planets, they're strung like garlands, everything, everyone's lives, every little animal you see is hanging on that thread of Krishna. So we are hanging by a thread. So the question is, which thread do you want to hang from? If you want to hang from the real thread, then grab onto your beads. That's the thread, and chant Hare Krishna, because then you're hanging by a thread that is always there, and it actually will never break. And it will pull us from this realm to the realm where our feet will always be on the ground. That's our base. So our bhajan is our base. And if we can daily remind ourselves of that and remember that there is only one safe position in the material world, everything we're doing here is important. We should do it with precision. We should be attentive to all the various aspects of our life. And we're able to do so effectively if we have our base before we do that and know clearly where we're standing. Śrī Harinam Prabhu ki jai, Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Śrī Caitanya Mahāprabhu ki jai.